Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Adventures Travel Club television show. We find ourselves, of course, trotting the highway here in Norway. Isn't this beautiful, Betty?
That doesn't look like we're trotting the highway, Marv. That looks
like we're rafting, right?
Rafting.
Yeah. No, I
Have
think
you got your helmet on?
Yeah. We're not going to talk about that because Betty's had her experience rafting in Costa Rica, right?
I have done that.
Yeah.
I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
Never again.
Anyway, this is a beautiful area, and of course, is on our last adventure. You know, we had just gotten off the ship as we went on the Sonia Fjord. But Betty, you have some interesting little tidbits to share with us today, right?
Well, like example, what do you want to hear about? Do you want to hear about goat's milk, or do you want to hear about the cute little horses
Sure,
that they have?
sure.
Well,
Okay.
wait a minute. I gave you a choice.
Both.
What will it be? You want both?
I want both, yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about horses, because I thought this was so interesting. They have a little horse, and it's called, I think you can pronounce it better than me, though. Well, it's a fjord horse, or Norwegian dun. Nobody knows where it came from or anything about it, really. But they think maybe, this is just a supposition, that maybe it was brought over on one of the early Viking ships from the east. Well, it's a little tiny one, and it's usually beige colored with a black stripe through the mane and down the back, and its front legs are also striped like those of a primitive horse of Asia. It has a little tiny head and a slightly curved nose, not unlike the Arab horse, which it kind of resembles that. So some years ago, a farmer in the western part of the United States thought they were just great, so he imported some of them, but to his grief, and not because the horse became homesick, or wouldn't work, but because every one of the horses that he brought over were promptly stolen by the Indians. They loved them too. So he was out of business in a hurry.
This must have been quite a time ago.
That was a long time ago, of course.
And it was a long time ago that they
asked for a tidbit.
Yeah, right. That's good. That they built this stave church that we're taking a look at too. And Betty, you know, I think the interesting thing here, now this church is still, is one of the original ones. Yeah, and the thing is that when you look up here, you see, as we were told before, that you see the dragon heads and you also see the cross. Well, of course, the dragon heads were from the Old Norse religion, and when Christianity came into Norway, they wanted to hedge their bets, so they put both the cross and the dragon heads up there on the thing, as we can see.
But you know, a lot of the churches in Europe have the gargoyles.
No, that's right.
Remember the one in Austria, wasn't it? That we saw so many of them.
Oh, when we were up at St. Stephen's, when we were up on top of it. We were lucky enough to get up on top of the roof on that.
Lots of gargoyles there. So I don't know what the gargoyles represented, except maybe to make a person a little fearful of doing something wrong, or because the gargoyles will get you if you don't watch out.
If you don't watch out, the gargoyles will get you.
But those are beautiful, aren't they? To me, it looked a little oriental. To the way the outcropping of they look like arms, sort of like.
Yeah,
to me.
But it's supposed to be a dragon's head, is what. Yeah.
Yeah.
And look at this. You know, you have to buy a ticket to get in here, and this is what the ticket is used for. And you know, it is expensive to keep up these old churches. And of course, as I said, there aren't that many of those left. There was a satanic group there that burned several of these down, and they had documented that, and that's what they told us when we were there.
Isn't that awful? Now those are shingles, right?
Yeah, those are shingles, and those are made out of wood.
All right. Do you know when they first did the shingling of all the roofs there, it was really hard work. They had a horse-drawn wooden frame with a big knife on it, like a hand plane, and that the driver would get on the top of that, and then they'd place a whole bunch of logs in a single row, and they would get on top with this contraption, and they would just sort of plow them off the logs and make the shingles that way. Pretty clever, huh?
Yeah, very clever, I should say. Some of the interesting things to do, of course, when you visit these stave churches, the real ones, is to go, what Betty and I like to do, is go wander around the old cemeteries here, and we can see some of the old headstones that are here. And some of these are really quite nice, quite ornate, and some are really quite plain. You know, it was in this area that we're going to go through as we're driving along, where and you can see the route that we took there as we left the fjord. There were some interesting happenings between churches and some celebrations, and our guide's going to tell us about that right now.
Once a year, they would have, in the summertime, a market up there. It would be a big service, it would be a big mass, But at the same time, they would have a market. They would sell goods, and they would be there for about a week. They'd come from all over the country to sell their goods and to go to this high mass. And unfortunately, as they camped there, they would also be eating and drinking, and fights would break out, and people would not behave as good Christians. So they decided to close down the church. There was too much violence and drunkenness and debauchery, so they decided that this is not a good idea, we're going to close down the church. They brought then the church bells to a museum in Bergen, I think it was. But then they decided to open up the church again. So the St. Thomas Church is now a very modern church, built in the 60s, where they brought back the original church bells, and they now are broadcast all over Norway on Christmas Eve. They ring in Christmas, and the bells of St. Thomas are the ones that ring in Christmas, and it's broadcast all over Norway. That's the story of St. Thomas.
Well, it was quite a story she had to tell, wasn't it?
Yeah. I can, well, yes, I can too imagine, but it just seems like at Christmas time to have such debauchery and stuff.
No, I don't. I think was it. Is
I
that when it was?
didn't I hear it?
I thought that she said when they rededicated the church with the bells that those bells are used at Christmas time for the broadcast thing.
Oh, well, maybe that's
yeah, because
true,
I think the festival or the market that they had probably was in the summertime, I suspect.
Oh, sure. They couldn't have that. Although they do things that, Christmas time was the time that the little trolls and stuff came out, and they had one little monkey troll. I mean, he wasn't a monkey, but he used to get into trouble. He'd wear a red blouse and pantaloons and had a red cap, and he loved to do horseplay, and he would upset the milk pails in the cow barn, and unless he was well fed. So really every dinner they had to put out cream porridge out in the barn, and then the next morning the bowl is empty, proof of the presence of these mannequins. And they did this a lot during the Christmas season with the little trolls. That's one of the stories they used to tell the kids.
You don't suppose that those little bowls were emptied by these maybe by the sheep that may have been wandering around?
Could have been the sheep.
Could have been the sheep.
Could have been the sheep, but they didn't think so. They thought it was this little
That's right.
troll.
Well, you can see here now we're going to kind of high up, and you see that the fences are there for the snow. So in the wintertime, I might imagine that this is going to be pretty rough area to get through,
Do you think it's navigable in the wintertime, the road?
Yeah, well,
I guess
it would be for
snowplows, huh?
Norwegians because they've got skis.
Yeah, that's right.
So you could cross-country ski it if you couldn't get through it on the bus.
And they would have to have it
Oh, yeah.
open for some
No, I'm sure
of
that it is.
transportation.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, the church that she was telling us about has been rededicated, I believe, was this little one off over to our left where we can see the... just kind of, just a little, almost a pyramid-shaped thing right there. Yeah.
Oh, really?
So this was the area that where the market was and where all of the drunkenness and everything went on. So that, my God, it looked pretty austere.
I guess they had to have something to do in the wintertime.
Evidently. Well, we stopped now for lunch, and actually we are headed for our overnight stay to a ski lodge. And on our way, we stopped, and this was just a beautiful, beautiful place. I was really impressed with this. And of course, there's all knotty pine here, and we stopped at. It was actually this is a restaurant, if you can believe that. And across the street, the water was coming down, and we'll see that in just a moment. It's just really a very, very beautiful place. Yeah, isn't that nice?
Yeah.
Everything was made of wood.
Yeah.
All of the furniture was carved out of wood. And there's your little reindeer.
Obvious why. Wood is available.
Wood is available, right. And this was
I wouldn't
very nice.
have it any other way.
You wouldn't, huh?
Nope.
Okay.
Not too many people there.
No.
But,
No. Yet this was a high season because this was July, so a nice place to visit. I'll tell you. And all of the wild animals, of course, that they had stuffed here was really kind of interesting to take a look at as well. Anyway, Betty, let's just go across the street and let's take a look at the water.
Let's vamoose.
Well, that water is really kind of really strong here and kind of ferocious, and yet this is just kind of like a little stream. So you can see how these waterfalls that we were looking at in some of the previous programs are so dynamic and so big and just spectacular.
Loud.
Yeah, and loud. Yeah,
because they do make a lot of noise going rushing down like that over the rocks.
Beautiful, though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine now there may have been some salmon going up that stream too. You know, you never know. Anyway, it was really quite nice. And this was a nice little break right after lunch to go across the road over here and just kind of enjoy really getting up close to the water, because most of it we've seen either we were on a boat or we were looking at a waterfall from a distance.
There are many different paths that have been formed by the big rocks. They find a way to get around it, and within another million years, that big rock will be gone.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that something? Well, it just proves to you that all things change, right?
You bet.
All things change.
Unfortunately, sometimes not for the better.
True. That's our bus, and of course had a wonderful bus driver, and our bus was really, really very, very comfortable. It was nice. And here's one of our little friends that just came up to visit us for a bit, and I think that's probably a walking sweater.
Isn't that funny? Marv, I think we talked at one time about where they pasture the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, they don't need to be pastured now because there isn't any snow, but they would have to bring them down from the mountains
in the wintertime.
In the wintertime, and have like sheep ranches maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they would do their shearing and.
Yeah, do they shear sheep once or twice a year? Probably once a year, right?
We saw them do it in Australia, but I don't know.
I would imagine it'd probably depend on the sheep and probably where they're raised.
Poor little things, they do need their coat in the wintertime.
Yeah, so it'd be the springtime, I suspect. Anyway, we're going to go back on down the road because we're going to head toward, right now we're heading toward Lillehammer. And that area, of course, everybody is pretty much familiar with that area because of the Winter Olympics that we saw a couple of years ago. But isn't this a beautiful drive, Betty?
Mm-hmm. Very pastoral.
It is really very nice. And this was the thing, and I want to thank all of the people that have called me that have been to Norway or that had relatives there that have shared their experiences with us, too. It's just been a real delight to talk with you on the phone and share some of these experiences. A lot of people that have been up there. But right now, we're going to listen to our guide a little bit more as she gives us a little more explanation.
And in Lillehammer, we will start with the Mayhaugen Open Air Museum. You've probably noticed that most places, they have an open air museum with the farmhouses, a collection of farmhouses from all over Norway. And it started actually by a dentist called Sandvik, who decided that for children in the future to have an idea of their heritage, we had to start collecting farm buildings and collecting artifacts from our yesterdays so that the children of tomorrow could see the history and not just hear about it. On the left-hand side, the old Øye stave church. We have many of these stave churches. And to the right, the more modern church. In many old stave church that wasn't modern and nice and white. But fortunately, we've found that in many cases, which we're very pleased about today, because when we have then restored the newer church, we have found the old stave churches in a little box, and we can then reassemble them, and there we've got the old stave church. Very pleased with that.
Well, it is nice that they were able to save some of the stave churches. You know, she was talking about this outdoor museum a little bit ago, and the guy that started that, Anders Sandvik, and we have a little information on him. He arrived in Lillehammer as a dentist in 1885. He actually had tuberculosis. I think he came there to die, is what is said in a little book that I bought there. And instead, he really did a lot of changes. Yeah, but you know, at that time, the old ways of life and social structures were under a lot of pressure from new lines of thought, and the ideals of liberty from the French Revolution had also led to upheavals in Norway. Parliament had won the ongoing struggle against the conservative elements in the government, and new organizations were penetrating society both politically and socially. And at the same time, there was an exodus from the countryside. So towns were attracting the youth, but the greater enticement was America. And the old rural culture was in the process of losing its roots, and the transformation had begun. And of course, there was a big migration to the United States, too. And, but this has happened all over. In small towns, you even take a look at that here. If your family isn't in business there, you don't have a farm or something, there's not much left.
The son gets the farm.
Yeah, there's not much.
But Marv, and they did a lot of good things in America. It was the school system that we have today that was, many of the ideas came from Norway.
Well, now, isn't that wonderful?
Yes, it is.
That's great.
So.
Yeah.
I think so.
That's great. Well, and all of our immigrants brought something, of course, to the country. As we can see here, we're getting closer. And Betty, look over here. We can see the roofs over there. Remember that had all of the growth on top there? So really kind of a sod roof type of situation there.
That amazes me. I think that would be harmful in our country. If it grows on mine every once in a while because I have a big tree in my backyard.
I get up there and
scrape it off. They tell me that'll be bad for my shakes.
But here, of course, the way that it is, it's advantageous. Now this is a little ski area, and this is we just stay overnight here, and there's a lot of ski lifts that you can see here, and there's also horseback riding and a few other things that you can do. And I'm really ashamed of myself because the night that we had dinner here, we went down for dinner. I thought, oh, this is going to be nice, and I didn't bring the camera. And this was one of the greatest smorgasbord spreads that I have ever seen, and so I apologize that I can't show you that, and I kick myself.
Who would have thought?
Well, I thought it was just going to be regular dinner, right? And then here, all of a sudden, this is the I've seen a lot of smorgasbord spreads, but this one beat them all. And who would have thought that up here in this little skiing area that you were going to have this absolutely fantastic tables laden with all sorts of wonderful goodies.
So you proceeded to try to eat as much as you could.
So I could remember it.
So you could remember it, and then you could say, oh, but now look it's gone.
That's right. And it was gone.
The high season is when it's all white and snowy, because this is a very popular ski resort. They have downhill skiing, they've got cross-country skiing.
Do you know the altitude roughly at the base of their hill?
We're about 900 meters.
900 meters is about 4 feet.
Yeah, 2,700.
Yeah.
Well, we are really here at the low season, which is kind of nice. High season, I imagine you would be up to your elbows in snow.
Yeah, but this is still high season for Americans coming here because of
for
the
tourists.
snow and
But not their high season for that.
No, I love what you said about you could shoot a cannon off and nobody.
You wouldn't hit anybody.
You wouldn't hit anybody.
Well, and the thing is we go through some of the little villages, because this did happen to be a Sunday, the day that we were traveling here, and we were going to go through a village here in just a little bit, and I noticed you said that a couple of times. You said, "Boy, this is really deserted. Where did everybody go?" And but the other thing that we have to keep remembering is that this was also the tourist season for the Scandinavians. So a lot of these people were out on vacation, and a lot of them had gone to other places as well. So that's one of the things I think we kind of forget about. But you remember what in Italy? What is it in August? Everybody just leaves.
Everybody in Europe
leave the country.
They leave the country. But you look at this right now, Marv. I didn't pay that much attention to it at the time, but it does look like a deserted village. Mm-hmm. And of course, Sunday has, like you said,
it has a lot to do with it. Well, and this is it. In many European countries, when Sunday comes, all the stores close. I mean, it's not like here that you're going to have Kmart and everybody else open 24 hours a day or whatever. The stores close and everybody takes the day off.
Good.
So I think that the emphasis is not so much on making the buck as it is to really have a day of rest and.
But not for religious purposes, really. It's just that's the custom, isn't that right?
Probably.
We're now down in Fagernes. It's like the capital for this little area. There are only 2,500 inhabitants in Fagernes, but nevertheless this is the central point for Valdres. They have their own little airport. You can fly to Fagernes if you're going skiing on in Baito. Quite a few people come by plane. So this is where they have their central administration for the county here.
So the little town just had about 2,500 people in it, and that was kind of the biggest town in this area right here.
That ain't very big.
You know, Betty, it says that medieval towns resulted from the development of secular and ecclesiastical institutions and the provision of storage space for traders and of premises for craftsmen. So towns are mainly located on the coast because of the need for the transshipment from land to transport the sea things. But in the countryside, the farm constituted the economic unit, and the farmer was in charge with his wife at his side. In towns whose citizens, those citizens that have privileges, well, of course, they were in control. And the craftsmen had their guilds, and the tradespeople their own organizations.
Well, they would have to. They made their own farm tools. They built their own houses. They were jack of all trades. They had to be.
Well, you would. And, you know, life was probably not very easy in the old days, I would suspect, especially in the wintertime. If you look at some of these mountains and some of these areas, some of these places were probably at one time very inaccessible. And as a result, you had to be pretty self-sufficient. And it's good to have a good family unit, because that was that was all that you had.
Mainstay. By the way, those were not dead sheep that
No.
we just saw on the road. This was their property. This was their road, and they would lie down wherever they want to and take their little rest. So you went around them. We thought at first they were dead. We saw the horse that time that fell, and we thought was dead. Remember?
But you know what they were doing? They were just getting themselves warm, because the roadway
from
was
the road,
was
huh?
already warm. Yeah,
My
so it
gosh,
was,
they had enough of a coat on. I would have thought that could have helped them somewhere along the line.
well, maybe they were the type that if they could have would worn another sweater on top of all that wool. What do you
Leave
think?
me alone. Don't share me.
But we're heading on now down toward Lilyhammer. There are two towns. There's Lilyhammer. You know what Lilyhammer means?
A little hammer? A little hammer?
That's right, a
Is
little
it
hammer.
really? I was just joking. I
No,
thought-
that's right.
Is
and
that right?
There's a town of Lilyhammer, and then the town of Hamar.
And they have a
That's
biggie
what-
hammer?
Well, I don't think so. But
Just
well,
a
maybe
little-
just Hammer might have been a bigger town. I don't
Okay.
know. But you know, during the Olympics, they had to use both of those towns. They had to have events going
I
in
would
both
believe
Hammer
that.
and in Lilyhammer both. So that's just a wonderful point of information I thought that we would share with
you're
everybody
so smart, Marv. You
no,
just
not really,
thrill
because
me
I
to
listened
death.
to Carol, our guide, and that's what
That's what she
she
said.
said. Right? Yeah. So you know, she must have been there during that time, because she got very, very excited about it. She certainly knew all the things that had happened in the little town. And again, it's going to look deserted when we get there.
And very typically Norwegian it is, because the Norwegians didn't believe in, well, kings having crystal palaces and so on. A king in Norway would be like a farmer, just a bit bigger. It'd be a bit more wealthy. So they expected kings to live in farms, not in castles. And the king wasn't that much different from a farmer. And the heroes are pretty much everyday persons. They don't win the princess by being strong and heroic. They win the princess by being, well, smart, being sensible. Maybe sensible in a little strange way, but getting there, not so much by showing how fierce they are, but by simply wondering and putting two and two together. The fact that the king put up notices on the church door, that was the usual way of passing news around. Well, they didn't have television, they didn't have radio, so if they didn't have newspapers either, if the authorities, being it the king or the local council, wanted to get news out to the people, that was the way they did it. They put up notices on the church doors.
What Carol was talking about too, she was referring to a fairy tale that grew out of this particular area where we were, but it was also giving us some very good historical information. Look, there's a black sheep.
Yeah.
There's a black sheep. How about
There's
that?
one in every group.
Yeah.
Not necessarily sheep.
But you know, now this area that we're going through, of course, there's a lot of sheep there, and there's also a lot of moose. And we saw, I didn't see any, but some people looked back in the woods and maybe they thought that they saw some. I don't know. Maybe they did, but I didn't see any. But later on we'll see, we saw beware of sheep signs, and you're going to see beware of moose signs. And some of the people don't particularly care for the moose too well, because the moose like to go and eat in the gardens and that type of thing, you know.
No,
But the moose were there first.
I'm wondering about the sheep as I look there, and we talked about a little bit that they have no identification.
They might have an ear tag on them. I'm not sure.
Maybe so. I'm used to having a blue ear, or they have some, or the back of them painted a red colors, not painted, dyed.
Well,
They will usually not be close to the road during the daytime, but we never know. But usually it's very early morning or late at night, at sundawn or sunset and sunrise, that we will see the moose wandering around. And of course they're especially dangerous when we don't know how many coming in from. First the father comes across, then a little bit of time can go, and then the mother, and then the calf will come following. But we do have a lot of moose, both in Norway and Sweden, and even quite close to the city centres, like in Gothenburg where I live. You'll find people just in the outskirts of Gothenburg being not too happy about the moose because they come in and eat off their garden plants. It's very exotic to begin with. When you move in, you find that you've got your own local pet as the size of a moose. But when they've started eating all your vegetables and all your nice roses and that, then you're not quite as fond of them any longer. Lillehammer. Well, Lillehammer means the little Hamar. There is a town south of Lillehammer, a much smaller town today called Hamar, but Lillehammer has grown because of the traffic. When they started putting in steamships on the Mjøsa, they could start transporting bigger goods, transporting things that they could then have a smaller industry that they set up, and they knew that they could export it from there. Along with the steamship came later on the railroad, and gradually Lillehammer grew and grew and became much bigger than Hamar. And Lillehammer is a town that you probably have seen pictures from if you've been watching the Olympic Games. The Winter Olympics in 1994 were held here. They were held also in Hamar and also in Gjøvik. Lillehammer is not big enough to have all of the competitions.
Well, it's time for us to say goodbye. We'll join you in Lillehammer next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.